Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy little human being. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's morbid makeup video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the terrifying murder of 30-year-old Shane Gilmer and the survival story of his girlfriend, 27-year-old Laura Sugden. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both BRATTERSTEIN, but no pressure. So guess what, guys? Today's video is in collaboration with Dossier. Are you familiar with Dossier? If you've been here before, you should be. And if you're not, I'm going to get you familiar with Dossier right now. Dossier is a fragrance company that creates luxury scents at a fraction of luxury prices, where a typical luxury perfume can cost anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars. Okay, Dossier's perfumes cost anywhere from $29 to $49, and they also offer deals where if you buy bulk, you can get up to 25% off plus free shipping when you buy 3 bottles or more. It sounds like a deal that's too good to be true, but it's not. It's actually real. Just like what's happening right now with this cat. This is real, and so is Dossier's deals. I got 2 scents to share with you today, and I'm so excited to get into these because I can smell them through the box, and it smells pretty darned good, buddy. So let me get into these. The first scent I got today is Fruity Jasmine, which is inspired by the Dior J Adore perfume, which I have not personally smelled, but I've heard it smells nice, and it smells like this. Like, damn, that smells good. It smells like flowers, but also a fruit salad. I don't know how to describe scents properly, but that is the best way I can. And the other scent I got, which if you've been here before, you know I love this one, is Citrus Green Apple, which is inspired by the Dolce & Gabbana Light Blue. And man, I don't know which one I like more because I've never smelled the Fruity Jasmine until today, and it smells so good. But I've gotten several bottles of the Citrus Green Apple because this is like the fan favorite. And man, I go back and forth. I bet they would smell really good layered. Should I layer them? I'm gonna layer them today. Oh, I cannot believe that I almost forgot like one of the most important things to me when it comes to Dossier. Dossier is a cruelty-free fragrance brand, and neither Dolce & Gabbana or Dior are. So if you've always wanted to try those scents, okay, because they smell so good, but you love animals as much as I do, this is the perfect deal for you. Plus, the Dossier scents are a fraction of the price of those very expensive non-cruelty-free options. And I know a lot of you have already gotten your Dossier perfumes, and I'm really happy. I get so stoked every time I see a comment from you guys saying that you've already got them and you love them and you're happy I brought them to you. I'm happy to bring them to you too. Anyways, guys, Dossier is offering members of the Brat Pack 10% off their purchase with the code BRATTERSTEIN at checkout, and I can't imagine that there's a better deal out there. They're already so affordable, plus you get 10% off. So if you would like to try a new scent today, by the way, they also have candles, so you can look that up as well. Make sure to click the link in my description box and use the code BRATTERSTEIN at checkout for your new favorite scent today. And I just want to now say a big thank you to Dossier for wanting to continue to work with me on my channel, and a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of the sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. Okay, so now that I am done spreading the good word of Dossier, we can get into this video and this case. Now, this is a case that I had never heard of before. I don't even know for sure how I landed on it. I was doing research on another case, and then I started going from article to article to article, and somehow I landed on this one, and something about this case just really drew me in and intrigued me. It's from another country, which I always like to read into because I don't cover enough of those on my channel, and when I was looking into it, it hit me right in the heart. I felt it personally. I don't want to say how, so I don't like spoil the story at all in the beginning, but there was a parallel to my life in this story, so it hit me a little harder. And it's just like a really, really tragic and horrifying case that starts as a undescribable home invasion and ends with one lover dead and the other fighting tooth and nail to survive. So today, I'm going to tell you that whole story, and while I do, I'm going to be putting on a full face of makeup, hence the makeup and morbid makeup. Now, if that's not really your thing, that's cool. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you find a channel that covers this case that you like more. But if you're on the fence, you're not sure how you feel, maybe stick around. I think you could be surprised by how much you like me. I'm kind of a good time. And if you're ever curious as to what products I'm using, because I'm not going to be talking about them because I'm discussing more important things, check the description box. I'll have everything listed for you along with earrings, nail polish, anything that you see today, I will list for your convenience. With all of that said, come, gather around, and let me tell you the story of the terrifying home invasion that led to the murder of 30-year-old Shane Gilmer and the attempted murder of his girlfriend, 27-year-old Laura Sugden. So, I want to start this video, this whole story off with a quote from Laura Sugden, the woman who was fortunate enough to survive this horrible ordeal. And the quote is this: "I got my head into thinking, if I'm going to die, and Shane's going to die, then I'm going to put up a fight." So we're going to begin on the night in question. This was January 12th, 2018, and at around 9 p.m., Laura and her boyfriend Shane arrived home for the day. This day had been a relatively normal day for the couple. They had gone to work that day. They were both housing workers for East Riding of Yorkshire Council, which, based on my research, seems to be sort of like city council. Please, England friends, let me know if I'm right here. And after work, the two had headed out for dinner at an Italian restaurant called, help me here, Gino di Acampo's Hull restaurant. Is that right? Is that right? Now, I may not have been able to pronounce that restaurant properly, but let me tell you, I found myself very interested because it sounded like a fancy place, so I went and I looked at the menu. Food interests me. What can I say? And it looks really, really good. It looks like a fancy place that they were having kind of like a date night. So this doesn't really matter. I just wanted to tell you that if you're in the area, the food looks delicious. So after having dinner that night, the two arrived home. It's about 9 p.m. and they're on a romantic high. They had just, had a real nice dinner at a nice fancy place. They had sent their 3-year-old daughter away for the night. She was staying at family's house so that they could have a whole date night, you know what I mean? Come home and still be unbothered. They were talking about their future together. They were talking about their wedding plans because they weren't married yet, but they wanted to be. They were talking about the future of the baby that they were expecting because Laura was pregnant at the time. And they were just feeling real good, real happy. And Laura started to head upstairs, and that's when she noticed a dark stain on their light-colored carpet. Laura said of her relationship with Shane, and I quote, "We were madly in love and worked at the same place and were hardly ever apart. Friends used to tease us because we were so in love. The honeymoon period never went away." She continued saying, and I quote, "I initially had doubts when I felt pregnant, but he constantly said, 'I can't wait to marry you and have this baby.'" Anyways, back to that night. Laura sees the stain on the floor and she's like, a little suspicious. She's like, what the heck is that? And the stain's sort of in front of her young daughter's bedroom door. The daughter, who fortunately wasn't home that night. So she goes to her daughter's room, she looks in and she finds nothing. So she's like, okay, cool. And then she heads down the hall to the bedroom that her and Shane shared. She pushed open the door and she was taken aback to see that there was a man in her bedroom, a man that she recognized. This was an old neighbor of hers, a man who she did not have a good relationship, who her and Shane had actually been in a bit of a feud with. A disgruntled old neighbor named Anthony Lawrence, and this man had a head lamp on, and he was aiming a crossbow at her. Now, the relationship between Laura, Shane, and their neighbor Anthony was strained now, but it hadn't always been that way. When she first moved in to the property, she just saw Anthony as a, quote, harmless hermit. Laura would even have described Anthony as being friendly and helpful at first when they first moved in. He was the type of guy who would offer to walk their dogs when he had the free time, but people who knew him longer and had more experience with him as a person referred to him as a loner and a psychopath. One person who knew him even called him a, quote, nutter who lived alone and kept to himself. And Laura's father, actually, who was a retired police officer, had a weird feeling about Anthony too. He had noticed that Anthony had prison tattoos on his hand, and when he had looked into him, he found out that Anthony did have a previous marijuana conviction, but that doesn't exactly scream violence. Definitely not the type of violence that Laura and Shane were going to receive at the hands of Anthony. Things between the couple and Anthony Lawrence had gotten strenuous, especially in the year prior to the attack. On one occasion, Shane had gone over to Anthony's property to ask him to turn his music down. It was late at night and the couple's young child was trying to sleep and couldn't because of the noise. And as soon as Shane stepped foot on Anthony's property, Anthony came outside waving an axe at him, telling him that if he didn't get off his property, he would kill him. And Laura heard this commotion and came over to ask what was going on, and Anthony told her that he would kill her as well. And from that point on, Shane started sleeping with an axe next to their bed in case Anthony was going to do anything crazy. It's crazy to think how fast a friendship and a relationship with a neighbor can just dissolve like that. It's scary, really. Luckily, I've never been in that position, but I know it's a thing. They have a whole freaking TV show on that called Fear Thy Neighbor. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've seen it, but if you haven't, you should. It's just crazy how fast that relationship can go so fucking shitty. So the 12 months prior to the attack were pretty problematic, with a lot of calls coming from Shane and Laura to the police and a lot of tension between the neighbors. There was a lot of noise complaints because he would keep his music and his television turned up at full blast at all times of the night. And there were also complaints of Anthony Lawrence growing a little of the devil's lettuce. Apparently the scent of weed was so strong that it was causing issues with the couple's daughter's asthma. But whenever the couple would call the police, they didn't do anything about it. There wasn't much they could do. They never went in and searched, so it just kind of was left unaddressed. So, because the cops wouldn't do anything, Laura actually took it upon herself to contact Anthony's landlord. Now, I believe from context clues that this landlord was both of their landlord, that this person owned the property, because I looked up photos and it looks sort of like a big house where you're renting off rooms, but I know that it was actual apartments just in this thing that looks like a big house. There was common area walls and stuff, like duplexes, but with more units. So I believe this landlord owned the whole property and therefore was the landlord of Anthony and also of Laura and Shane. So Laura calls and is like, hey, here's what I think. I think maybe you should just do an unexpected stop by. Just come by Anthony's apartment and see what he's like so you can see what we're dealing with here. So the landlord's like, sure, yeah, cool, I will do exactly that. And when this landlord came and she interacted with Anthony, she was so taken aback by how intense and aggressive that he was that she decided that she was going to evict him and was in the process of evicting him when this attack on the couple took place. So in response to the eviction, Anthony kind of went back and forth on how he felt. On one hand, he told his landlord he didn't give fuck. Oh, I like how I bleeped out flying and still said fuck. He said he didn't give a shit if they were going to evict him, that he wanted to leave, that he wanted to move out into the middle of nowhere where nobody would bother him. But then he would also get super pissed and did things like pouring a ton of manure all over Shane and Laura's flower garden. Or it might have been a normal garden, fruits and vegetables, all over their yard. He was like, here's some manure, enjoy that, you goddamn snitches, essentially. Okay, so back to that night in question. Due to the drama between the two households and the fact that Anthony was in the process of being evicted anyway, in the week prior to the attacks, he had actually been staying away from the house. He hadn't really been there in about a week. So when Laura and Shane got home that night and they saw that Anthony's car was in the adjoining driveway, they were like, huh, that's weird. I guess he's back. Let's hope there's no drama. And they went inside and they were just surprised to see that his car was there. But definitely not as surprised as they were about to be. And Laura said of that moment of seeing Tony in her bedroom with the crossbow, and I quote, "When I opened the bedroom door, the light from the bathroom shone into the room, and I could see that it was Tony, and he had something in his hand. I thought at first that it was a gun." This monster, Anthony Lawrence, had broken in to Laura and Shane's apartment through this adjoining wall/loft. I'll put a photo so you can see what I'm talking about. But he had basically went from his unit, broke into their unit, and then just waited for them to come home so he could rain actual hell down on this unsuspecting but expecting couple. Because as I said, Laura and Shane were expecting a baby together. And she was 5 months pregnant at the time that this took place. And I want you to keep that in your mind when you hear what happens, because it's the stuff of nightmares. I can't even imagine dealing with any sort of trauma being pregnant. Like, I'm so afraid to get hurt right now because I'm so afraid of anything happening to this little boy. So I can't even imagine what this was like for them. And you know, I said in the beginning that this case really got to me for a personal reason, and this was why. I was just picturing myself in this position, and it was nightmare fuel, quite frankly. Once Laura saw that it was in fact Anthony, and she had a moment to process like what she was seeing, she started to scream at him like, "What the fuck are you doing in my house? Get out of my house." And she then like selflessly yelled down to Shane and was like, "Don't come up here. He's got a gun." She was like, "I'll handle this myself. We don't need both of us getting hurt. Do not come up here. Don't come up here." But obviously, I'm sure you can guess that Shane did not stay away. That was his woman. That's the woman he loved. That was his unborn baby. This case is going to break your heart. So though Laura had been yelling like, "Get the fuck out of my house," she was terrified, and she actually tried to like retreat back into the hallway, but Anthony Lawrence like ran after her, and he ended up pushing her back into the main bedroom and shoving her down on the bed. And he was gonna just, I'm assuming, attack her immediately, but then his attention was taken off her when he heard Shane climbing up the stairs. So he ran back out into the hallway, and it's at that moment that Laura took it upon herself to grab the phone and to dial emergency services so that they would at least be connected while what was going to happen was going to happen. Though this didn't end up mattering and it didn't end up being helpful, she at least tried. And she then took the phone and shoved it in the pocket. She was wearing like a denim maternity dress. She was pregnant, and she shoved it in the pocket so that it would stay connected, but he wouldn't see it to like try to get the phone and disconnect it, if you know what I mean. Laura said of this moment, and I quote, "I was terrified. It was surreal. I kept thinking, this isn't happening. Then I heard Shane say, 'What the fuck is that?' The next thing I heard was him moaning in the hall." Shortly after hearing Shane start moaning, Anthony Lawrence came back into the bedroom that she was in, and he was dragging Shane along with him. Shane had been shot with the crossbow. It had gone through his arm, breaking his arm and some of his ribs, and had damaged his liver and kidney before lodging into his spine. At this particular moment, Laura was a wreck, and she was terrified. She saw the love of her life with a fucking arrow through his body, and she said to Lawrence, like, "Is that going to kill him?" And his response must have just sent shivers down her spine. And just, I can't imagine being in this situation that they were in. But he looks at her and he says, while smirking, "Yes. And now I'm going to kill you too." Laura said later that that smirk was the only emotion that Anthony Lawrence showed the entire time during their attack. Anthony Lawrence then started screaming at Shane, asking Shane to give him his cell phone. He didn't want Shane to have a cell phone. So Shane's trying to get it out of his pocket, but he's having trouble doing it because he's been shot through the arm with a crossbow. So then Anthony tells Laura, like, help him get that cell phone out. So she does, and eventually they do get the phone out. And as soon as they do, Anthony takes it and starts bashing it into the ground, smashes it over and over so that it's unusable. He then leaves the room. He reloads his crossbow, and he comes back. So when Anthony comes back, he's got his sights set on Laura. He's got this crossbow pointed at this pregnant young woman, and she's crying and she's begging and she's asking, like, why? And this is when he tells her it's good old-fashioned revenge. They had tried to get him evicted from his home, and he wasn't having it, and he was going to kill them about it. And she tried to deny it, obviously, because she's trying to do whatever she can to save her life. And this is when she and Shane find out that he doesn't just think this, he knows this, because he had actually bugged their home and had been listening to everything that was going on in their apartment for the last year. So he didn't think that they were responsible for his eviction. He knew. Laura was terrified. She was scared for herself. She was scared for Shane. She was scared for the little baby in her tummy. She was scared to leave her other daughter orphaned. She was just horrified. So she starts begging and pleading with Anthony, like saying, please don't, please, what can I do? I'm a mother. I'm pregnant. Like, please don't do this to me. And he didn't give a shit about any of this, dude. He actually ended up going like this and mocking her as she begged for her life. He was like, blah, blah, fucking blah, before raising the crossbow and shooting her in the head. Laura said after the shot that the blood was just gushing down her face and that she immediately felt dizzy, and that she looked over at that moment and she saw Shane. He had seen this whole thing happen. I can't even imagine how that would be for him to just have to sit and watch because he can't do anything with his condition. And she said that he just looked really, really pale. And that, of course, he was crying. So at that moment, after shooting Laura, Anthony left. He walked out of the room. And Laura somehow summoned the strength to stand up. She was still alive, and she stood up. And she grabbed the arrow and tried to pull it from her head. She ended up being successful in doing this, but she had to use 2 hands and really pull because it was like really lodged in her head. And she then stumbled over to her boyfriend Shane, and she got down on the ground beside him and she squeezed his hand. I can only imagine this moment and how relieved she must have felt to be out of the situation, to have the madman gone, to be with Shane. But that relief was short-lived. When Anthony Lawrence walked back in the room, he had just left the room to get another arrow for his crossbow, and he was standing there looking at her. At this moment, Laura did not hesitate. She didn't give this guy a chance to reload. She launched herself at her attacker. She ran, she slammed her body into him, and she was like, you know what? I'm going to take him down. I'm going to do what I have to do. Unfortunately, he ended up being able to overpower her and the two were like grappling on the ground, and he ended up getting on top of her and straddling her. And once he had her down, he took the arrow and started jabbing it into her neck, just trying to like stab it through her neck while he had her on the floor. And later the doctor said that the wound in her neck was so deep that you could see her larynx and her voice box. Somehow though, even with that deep injury in her neck, this woman was able to survive and overpower her attacker. She must have had adrenaline pumping through her like a motherfucker. Like, I can't even imagine. She was only 5'2" and very slim. Like, she was a tiny lady. But she was able to throw this man off her, and she ended up getting on top of him and got him pinned down. Laura said of this moment of actually overpowering Anthony, and I quote, "For the first time, Tony had a flicker of fear in his eyes. I don't think he expected me to overpower him." My gosh. Okay. As Laura had Anthony pinned to the ground, she started to call out for Shane for help, being like, come over here, help me keep him down. We don't want him to get back up. Like, just trying to, get Shane to help her stop the attack fully. But Shane just cried out that he couldn't. And when she looked over, she saw that he was pale and that he just had tears streaming down his face because he couldn't move. He couldn't do anything. It was at that moment that Anthony was able to push Laura off his body, but instead of trying to continue with his attack, at this point he actually did run and he fled from the house. Immediately, Laura ran to Shane and tried to sit with him and tried to stay by his side, but Shane wasn't having it. He just kept telling her to go, to run, to go get help, that if she didn't go and make sure to keep her and their baby safe, he would never forgive her for it. Laura said of this moment with Shane, and the last things he said to her, and I quote, "He was crying. He was gasping for breath. He looked at me, really looked at me, like the look someone gives you when they're going away for a long time. And then he told me, 'Be strong. I love you.'" Those were the last words that Shane would ever say to Laura. So Laura didn't want to leave Shane. Obviously, she was terrified and she loved him. She wanted to stay beside him, but she did what he said, and shaking, she ran downstairs. She ran to the house. She had to fight to open 3 different locks on her door to get out. And once she was out, she took off running to the closest neighbor. And when the neighbor opened the door, they were like blown away to see her. Like the amount of injuries this woman had, the type of injuries she had, she was like covered from head to toe in blood. They thought she had been in a car accident because of how bad she looked. And they said that the wound in her neck had blood, quote, flowing from it like a tap. That is horrifying. As Laura sat at her neighbor's home, waiting for the ambulance to arrive, Shane had actually managed to get up and pull himself downstairs so that he could call emergency services himself as well. And when he called, he told the dispatcher on the phone that he believed that Anthony had kidnapped Laura because she was gone and she hadn't come back and he hadn't heard from her, so he thought that she may have been kidnapped. He ended up staying on the phone with emergency services for 30 minutes as he bled out in their home. He told them he couldn't move. He told them there was blood everywhere. He was crying during this call and his breath was really, really heavy. And he said a lot of really heartbreaking things during his last conversation on this earth. There was an inquest done after all of this happened, and it was at that point that some of the last things he said were released. There's a lot of them, so I'm just going to give you a couple of quotes because it's really fucking sad, dude. So I'll give you a couple. If you look online, you can find more, but I don't think we need to go through every single thing he said in that 30-minute call, but I will give you a couple. I need to tell my mom and dad I love them. I've fallen out with them last week, but I really love them. I love Laura. I hope they are all okay. I love my children. Oh my God, I really, really wanted this baby. I really wanted it. I feel like I'm fading. I've lost so much blood. So ambulances did arrive at the home relatively quickly, but they weren't able to go in and actually assist Shane until police got there and had done a thorough check of the house because it was thought there could still be an active shooter on scene. So by the time they were able to actually get into the house and assist Shane, he was too far gone. And this has been hard for Laura because she does believe that if they had just gotten into the house sooner, if they had just gone in, that he may have lived. It was, however, ruled that the delays were inevitable because of the situation that they were in, and that Shane's injuries were bad enough that there's no way to say that they would have even been able to save him. The 30-year-old father of three and a half, because they had their baby on the way, Shane Gilmer, suffered a cardiac arrest and died in the early morning hours of January 13th in the hospital. Laura said of the delay from the ambulance personnel and the fact that Shane died, and I quote, "He was strong. He was alive for nearly 3 hours after he was shot. Had he had a blood transfusion earlier, he might have lived." Laura was rushed to the hospital to have her injuries addressed, and she was so terrified of being put to sleep during her surgery because she was so traumatized by what happened to her that she asked them to work on her with like the type of anesthetic that would keep her awake, which is just like wild to me. And she was then informed that, Shane didn't make it. And when she was told this, she said that she didn't want to live, that she wanted to die, but death would be nothing compared to the pain of losing Shane. So as I'm sure you can imagine, police were looking for Anthony Lawrence. There was a big-ass manhunt put out for him to bring him back and bring him to justice for what he had done. But unfortunately, that justice never would come. 55-year-old Anthony Lawrence was found dead of an overdose in a camper van 2 days after the attack near East Leighton, North Yorks. He had rented this camper van about a week before the murder, and that's where he had been staying when he wasn't at the home. Since I remember I told you he had been missing for a week, well, that's where he had been. Inside this camper van after death, police found arrowheads that were consistent with the ones used to murder Shane. Now, why Anthony Lawrence ended up taking his life, people are not sure. He initially had another plan. He had initially planned to run and escape to Thailand. And he had even asked his sister to watch his dogs while he was in Thailand. While he was in Thailand she had agreed to do so, but he had never actually bought a ticket. So it's unclear if he was planning to and just didn't get to it, but he had definitely thought about it because he said it and asked his sister to watch his dogs. And for clarity, his sister had no idea what he was planning. They were able to determine that. His whole family had no idea why he was planning to go to Thailand. They just knew that that was his plan, maybe on vacation. And when they learned what he had done, their minds were blown. They could not believe it. The coroner just said that it was clear that after attacking and killing Shane and attacking and attempting to kill Laura, that Anthony Lawrence had just chosen to take his own life. And Laura has said that, you know, she's relieved that he's gone, but that she had one relatable quote about it, and that was, quote, "I only wish I had killed him myself." I think we can all, maybe not all, I think that some of us can relate to that. Shane's mother, Pam, said of losing her son in this way, and I quote, "We've lost so much as a family. A fantastic, caring, loving son, brother, and dad. His little girls cry themselves to sleep each night because they miss their daddy." She also said, quote, "Shane was always friendly and helpful. Everyone loved him, and he had lots of friends. Shane's life was horrendously cut short, and our lives will never be the same again. He was always full of fun and was a bit mischievous as well." After the attack, Laura ended up moving back in with her parents so that she could have help physically and emotionally, and just help with, you know, being a single mother now. And she did end up giving birth to a little baby girl who she named Ella, who looks just like her daddy, and she was born in August of 2018. So not only did Laura survive, but so did her little baby. Laura said that she did have a lot of trouble at first when she first gave birth to her new daughter, because it was just like a lot to be a single mom, especially after going through something like that. I can't even imagine what that would be like to have this happen and then go through the rest of that pregnancy alone, knowing that you don't have this baby's father with you, and then to give birth to this baby who looked just like this person that you lost. It sounds so heartbreaking. Like, I can see it being positive because at least you have a piece of this person, but I can also see it just being so heartbreaking all the time. And she said that it was also hard because her other daughter, Isabella, I believe was her name, was very, very close with Shane, and was so sad that he wasn't there, and was always asking her mom if Shane could pick her up from school. And she'd have to, I can't even imagine each time just being like, he's not here. And she also said that this same daughter, the one that would always ask for Shane, was really scared of her mom at first, because when she came out of the hospital, she was like really beat up and covered in bandages. So she just had like a really hard time for a while. Laura said of this experience, and I quote, "I didn't know how I was going to manage on my own. But the minute Ella was born, something in my heart healed. She just looks exactly like her dad. It's sometimes painful to look at her. I've told her Daddy is a star, and she'll ask, 'My daddy loved me, didn't he?'" After Shane's death, Laura announced that she was going to be campaigning for safer laws regarding crossbows. And she was actually trying to get them outlawed from being sold over the counter, because anybody could just go in and buy a crossbow. There weren't really any regulations surrounding that. Shane was a loving partner and a wonderful dad and stepdad. He is missed every day by me and the rest of his family. It was clear from his final words how much he loved us all, and I hope he knew how much we all loved him. Shane was murdered in the most cruel and terrifying way imaginable. It is unbelievable that the sale and ownership of such a lethal medieval weapon remains unregulated in our modern society. There are no laws in place to help prevent crossbows from falling into the hands of twisted and dangerous individuals like Anthony Lawrence. Under the current legislation, crossbows are not allowed to be purchased by someone who's under 18, and it's unlawful for, somebody under 18 to purchase one, or somebody to sell one to somebody who's under 18. And in addition to that, they are considered the type of weapon that you can't just carry out in the open with you. They Like, I think you can, but there have to be like very specific reasons that you're carrying it. It's not something that people just like walk up and down the street with. Though Laura tried, her Crossbow campaign wasn't really seeing any traction. There wasn't any movement. That was until there was another Crossbow crime that took place in her area. That was when a 19-year-old stormed the Windsor Castle with a crossbow, and due to that, the Home Secretary ordered a review of crossbow laws. Laura called this progress bittersweet. She's happy that something is actually moving, but she's frustrated that it took an attack on the royal family for anyone to give a shit. Like, she saw it as Shane and anyone else like Shane being killed with a crossbow as not mattering, essentially, which I get that. Laura has since done her best to move on. As of 2021, at least, she had a new boyfriend. She did say that it was really hard on her new boyfriend, though, because she was still so in love with Shane. She planted a tree in Shane's memory, and she had a little plaque under the tree for him in the shape of a heart, and it said, quote, "Loved and missed every day." And I want to now give you one last quote from Laura before we round up this video. I think it just illustrates the crime, and it lets you see how affected people are when something like this happens and how much of a ripple effect there is. "I'm not sure if I have 100% ever had a chance to grieve properly. I had Isabel to look after, and then our baby. I think I've tried to keep myself busy and tried to pretend it hadn't happened. I was in denial for a long, long time. I don't believe you ever get over something like this. I can't imagine the grieving ever comes to an end." And with that heartbreaking quote, that, my friends, is the story of the murder of Shane Gilmer and the survival story of his girlfriend Laura Sugden and the two's unborn daughter. Isn't that absolutely crazy? Had you ever heard of this case? Because when I got into this and I started looking into it, I always do, to look on YouTube to see if there are already a lot of videos on the case, because sometimes I'll still cover a case if there are already a lot of people covering it. It kind of depends. But when I looked this one up, there were no videos, not a single one covering this case. And it blew my mind because, to me, it's so intense and it's so interesting, and I'm surprised people weren't talking about it. It wasn't even that long ago. Just imagine, I don't know how many of you live in apartments, but just imagine that your neighbor essentially tunnels through the wall to break into your home and then lies in wait for you to come home and then tries to murder you and does murder your partner with a crossbow. All while you are pregnant and you are begging for your life, you're begging for your partner's life, you're begging for the life of your unborn baby, and this person laughs in your face and shoots you in the head. How can any person do that to another human being? How can you hear these pleas from a person that you've known, you've talked to, you know them, you know their lives, you know what a loss it's going to be, you know what you're taking, and yet you hear that and you still do it? I will never understand that. It is unbelievable that Laura and her daughter survived. She was shot in the head and then stabbed in the throat. That's unimaginable. Like, I can't even imagine going through something like that pregnant. Like, I'm so afraid. I've said it, but I'm so scared of getting hurt right now. I'm like super, super careful not to turn too hard and too fast in the bed. My husband freaks out when, you've seen Bows, the tiny white cat. If that cat walks across my stomach, my husband loses his mind because he thinks that he's going to step on the baby's head. The doctor told him that that's fine, but it doesn't matter. We're so like cautious of anything going wrong that I can't even imagine the pain and the fear that she must have felt. And then to go through all that and survive, just to find out that your unborn baby's father, the man that you love so much, has died, is unimaginable. And all over an eviction. It's just, wow. But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you all the facts you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for remembering Shane and Laura with me today. What happened to them that night is unimaginable horror that no human being should ever have to go through. I can't even imagine what those final moments were like for Shane. That like breaks my heart to be incapacitated to the point that you can't help your partner and just have to sit there and watch the woman you love, the woman who's pregnant with your baby girl, get shot in the head with a crossbow and be able to do nothing to help her. And then for Laura to look over and just see him laying there crying, and then to know that he's dying and to not be able to do anything and to just have to leave him there. And then for his final words to have been recorded. So she knows how scared he was. She knows how hurt he was and how much he loved her and how much he wanted their baby. It's like, it's too much. Anyways, guys, please let me know of any cases you would like to see me cover in the future. I have a long list of cases that I want to cover, and every time you leave a suggestion, I add it to the list so I can try to look into it, because I love to know the cases that you guys recommend, because you guys recommend some really crazy ones, dude. And I know that you're filled with good ideas and good taste. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Of course, if you haven't already, don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, I have all my social media linked down below for you for your convenience. I have an Instagram, I have a Twitter, I have a Facebook page, and I have a Facebook group. It's all listed down there, along with all of the makeup I'm wearing, earrings, nail polish, anything that you may be interested in is listed down there as well, along with the link to my merch shop. If you want some cool clothes to make you look fresh to death, that's where you can find them. And now, with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.